Zach is back. It's the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
4:36 is the time in the Princeton Orthopedic Associates Studios. 609-919-9200 is the number to get on board for the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. I was reading an article this morning, and it was a great piece on The Ringer by a guy that used to live here, actually. Now he's on the West Coast in John Gonzalez, and it is titled, Trust and the Process. On the court, the Sixers are the feel-good story of the season, pushing for the playoffs after years of tanking. Off the court, the Brian Colangelo-led organization is having some of the same transparency issues that marred Sam Hinkie's time with the team. And now joining us all the way from the West Coast right now is John Gonzalez. Gonzo, Zach Gelb, appreciate a few minutes, and how are you?
Excellent, Zach. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing great. Can't complain. Well, I can complain actually about a few things with the way that Brian Colangelo is not being really transparent. And actually, let's start the conversation off with this. You have the Embiid news, and he was trying to hide this until Derek Bardner broke the story. Why was Brian Colangelo trying to be so transparent, or not transparent, about this injury?
Yeah, that's a great question. The way that they've handled this for sure has been botched on any number of fronts. I mean, you know, the Bardner story really illuminated a lot of things. So the MRI happened for Joel Embiid on January 20th, and thereafter they kept telling everybody that it was a simple bone bruise when they knew to be better, or they knew, you know, the story that wasn't true, that he had a torn meniscus. And then despite the MRI, they let him play on the 27th in a nationally televised game. Then they shut him down again. And then they're still telling the same fiction. And the only reason I suspect that they told the truth about it was because Derek Bardner broke the story. So good for Derek Bardner. He's killing it.
No doubt about that. And one of the only reasons that, and I know there's a lot of reasons, but one that I think has some legitimacy on why they would try to hide this thing and just tell you it's minor, not severe, and also day-to-day, is maybe they didn't want ticket sales to be affected by this, because if you say that, oh, Embiid has this tear, then people that may be on the fence about buying tickets when his injury's up in the air of coming back that night, maybe they still go to the building. How about that theory?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that could be part of it, but also just look at the way that they've handled things in general, not just under Colangelo, but dating back, like, even pre-Hinkie. I mean, they've been a pretty secretive organization, but it's really manifested itself in a super sloppy way under Colangelo. I mean, part of the reason why they brought him in the first place was because he was supposed to be better at this stuff than Sam Hinkie. He was supposed to be more available. He was supposed to, if not be more transparent, then at least not step in it frequently. And you know, going back to Okafor last year with the meniscus tear, it was supposed to be 2 months. He was out until the very end of the preseason. Jared Bayless, they said that he just had, like, basically what they amounted to a wrist boo-boo, and turned out that he needed wrist surgery and was out for the rest of the year. Nerlens Noel, you know, he has this surprise surgery right before the season starts and throws complete shade at Colangelo, not just before he goes on the men, but after he came back and saying that they needed to figure this out. So there's been any number of things here that Colangelo could have handled better.
I love the headline of this article, Trust and Process, because for so many years, and even still to this year, it was trust the process, and a lot of people that were loyal followers of Trust the Process now have trust issues. And you're right. When Colangelo was brought in, it was appearing that they would be more transparent, and that's basically why Hinkie kind of resigned, because he wasn't being transparent, and the owner and Colangelo got fed up with that. How about now? It's a little bit ironic to me that the Colangelo haters right now are some of the people that defended Sam Hinkie for doing the same thing, basically.
Yeah, and that's fair, but I think that part of the reason why those people are getting fired up is because of the attendant hypocrisy of it. I mean, when they moved Sam Hinkie out and they moved Colangelo in, as I noted, I mean, I sat in that press conference, and they said, you know, we need to do a better job of these things. We're going to communicate better. You know, Brian's got relationships across the league, X, Y, and Z, and then all the things that the organization and the anti-Hinkie fan base, and then, you know, national skeptics criticize Hinkie for, Colangelo has come in and done the same thing. So if there are, you know, the pro-process, race to Ricky Sanchez crowd out there who want to trumpet Hinkie and knock Colangelo, that's why. It's the hypocrisy.
Do you think Sam Hinkie will get another job in the NBA one day?
I think so, yeah. I mean, he's really a super smart person, and he's been knocked out for a lot of things. Like, there's this misconception that Sam Hinkie wasn't available. That's not true. He didn't do a lot of things on the record, and he didn't do TV and radio interviews. But if you needed, I talked to him. People who covered the team talked to him all the time. You could grab him before a game. You could call him on the phone. He just didn't want to be on the record about certain things because he was super private about, the information and not giving his opponents an advantage. But you look at what's happening with this team, how Embiid has played despite the injury, which is certainly not his fault. Noel, they're going to have Ben Simmons back. They've got picks moving forward. They've got pick swap rights with the Kings. I think he's been vindicated already. And I think if you look around the league and you ask yourself, who the smart general managers are and who aren't, I still think Sam Hinkie would be counted among the former.
So let me take this a step further. With the Hinkie supporter who is clearly not happy with Colangelo today, and they have every right not to be happy with Colangelo today, what do you think Colangelo has to do in order to gain that trust of the fan?
Good question. I think probably not going. So it's one thing. There's a difference between being transparent and maybe stretching the truth or even like breaking it, right? Because if Colangelo had gone on the radio or stood in front of the media and said, stuff that's going on with Embiid, we're going to keep it close to the vest. Hopefully he's back on the court soon. Hard to knock him for that. But for him to say, it's just a bone bruise, I don't know why you guys are giving me so much heat about it. What's the problem with the skepticism? I don't understand it. It's something he said. If there was something untoward going on, that he would have been the first person to tell you about it. Well, that's obviously not the case. So I think, how does he regain the trust? Not telling them things that are untrue would be a good place to start.
And he really lost me as we're talking to John Gonzalez when he started mentioning the HIPAA laws, because I've never heard a GM actually say that. And just, it's like, I don't expect my general manager to tell me every single thing. I don't want them to tell me every single thing. But when it comes to the health of your best player who's a transcendent player and he has a tear in the meniscus, whether it's minor if you think it is or not, like, you have to tell the fans that information. It's embarrassing.
Well, the HIPAA thing was just really bizarre. I mean, it was bizarre.
It was stupid.
It made me laugh. It made me laugh because, it was so obvious that that's not the reason why he wasn't saying anything. And anybody who believed that was, I guess, you haven't paid attention to sports ever. So that was bizarre. That was just a bizarre way to handle it.
John, since we have you here, the whole Okafor story right now, where he wasn't with the team and now he's back with the team and he'll probably play tonight according to Brett Brown. Why the heck was Okafor not with the team in Charlotte? Like, that's stupid to me.
Yeah, that's a great question. I talked to a number of league executives who were also puzzled by that. They anticipated when Okafor didn't make the trip to Charlotte that the trade was done, that he had been traded to somebody. I mean, that's really why you would do that. So for you not to put him on that trip, and then for Brett Brown to flat out say the reason why he's not on the trip is because of these trade rumors, was an extraordinary step when you don't have a deal in place, especially because, and I wrote this story last night on Twitter, he just rejoined the team. So you kept him out from the Charlotte game. You said that he was involved in these trade rumors. He's obviously aware of these things. And then you have to have this weird reconciliation where, you put him back in the fold, and you're like, oh, yeah, about that. Never mind. So, again, a lot of things have been botched here, and that's just one of them.
Looking back at Okafor, because now a lot of fans think that they're not going to get anything significant back in return from now until the trade deadline, the Sixers look very desperate, and we all know that. Looking back at it, do they have to make a trade at the draft in regards to Okafor if they ever wanted a chance to get anything back of any value?
At the trade deadline?
No, I'm talking about at the draft.
Oh, at the draft. I mean, look, my position is that if they can get anything, like when I heard that they were going to trade him potentially, as there was trade conversations with New Orleans, I thought, if they could get a Muffaletta back, that would be a great yield. I don't know how many other people feel positively about Jahlil Okafor. I talked to some league sources, some league executives who said that they do think that there's a market for Okafor and that the Sixers could get a first-rounder back. Now, where you plot that first-rounder and what kind of protections are on it and how far in the future that might be. There are all these different variables to it. I'm still skeptical that they could get any sort of first-rounder for him, even a back end with heavy protection. But, yeah, I mean, they need to move him. He's the less valuable player in that front court logjam. So if they can untangle that knot, and to Colangelo's, in fairness to Colangelo, it's not his fault. He inherited it. But it is his job now to fix it.
John Gonzalez with us. John, before we let you run, I just want to get one take on Brett Brown. But before we do that, our poll question today is, will Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid play for the Sixers again this year? And here are the answers. Just Ben, just Embiid, both will play, both won't play. How do you vote?
Ooh, this is tough. I'm going to say yeah. I'm going to say yeah on both. I'm an optimist on these things, which has burned me time and time and time again with the Sixers. I think that Simmons will get out there, and if this is really a minor meniscus tear, no surgery is required, Embiid should return to the court at some point.
I just have a hard time believing it because, we thought that Simmons would be on the court at least coming soon, and when you hear Brett Brown talk about the 5-on-5 play, it doesn't give me a good inclination that he's going to be on the court. And with Embiid, I don't really see the incentive to get him back on the court. You know what he is. You know how good he could be. It's like, why would you risk the injury right now?
Yeah, and I hear you, and I understand the skepticism and all of the tea leaves, and I have no insider information on this. I didn't talk to anybody about whether or not they will return. But at what point do you go, okay, enough with the, we're not going to keep him out because we know what he is and we're not going to win this year and blah, blah, blah. I mean, they did that already. They did that I'm talking about Embiid specifically. You could make the case for Simmons on that front. But with Embiid, if he's not injured or if he's has an injury that he can recover from and could in fact play, then play him. We're past that point now. If he can play, he should play.
I do agree that eventually you got to take the training wheels off, but just looking at the Sixers' approach on this, I just have a feeling that both these guys won't be back. Hey, I could be wrong. John Gonzalez, since you now have the national field, because we know how things can get crazy here in South Jersey and Philadelphia, how are the Sixers perceived nationally?
I think probably the way that we thought about them previously, especially this year. I mean, look, the rebuild was a super divisive topic, but the way that they've played and with Embiid on the court, they've been a fun story. But then they're also a huge mess in the front office and in terms of handling PR things, which has been the case forever. So I think, people look at it and they want to root for Embiid. He's a lot of fun on social media. They look at this young up-and-coming team with all these young pieces and they're intriguing. But there's still a lot to fix.
One part I really did like about your article today, and I did like the whole thing, but with Brett Brown specifically, I just feel so bad for Brett Brown, John, because with Hinkie, he had to answer all the questions, and now with Brian Colangelo, he has to get all the questions. It was actually good to see him get fed up a few nights ago because it's been very unfair what they've done to him.
Yeah, and look, I said this all the time. I was and remain a huge proponent of Sam Hinkie. The one part that I thought was really hard to defend Sam on is, he could sit there and talk to us on the side, and he could talk to us on the phone. But ultimately, the on-the-record stuff was left to Brett Brown, and that was hugely unfair, and it's still hugely unfair.
Why do you think that was? Because you see him write that 13-page resignation letter. You see him have a few tweets here and there. You saw the article he was drinking La Colombe coffee. Why wasn't he a little bit more transparent in his time in Philly?
That's sort of the way he handled things. There's a difference, I suppose, between public transparency and the kinds of things that he was, willing to do on the side with reporters, point in the right direction, take your phone calls, sit down and chat with you before a game. He was available. But if you're talking about, he's going to put a quote on the record or do something, on air on the radio or on TV, no, you're right. He just didn't do that, and that was his style. And it was to his detriment. I told him frequently that he should do more of it because here's another surprising thing. He was good at it. Sam is a super smart, funny human being, but for whatever reason, he didn't want to show that side.
Last thing, so when you're sitting there talking to Sam Hinkie before a game, and when I was at Temple, he was eating pizza in the media room, so I was able to see that side of him. When John Gonzalez said, hey, you should talk a little bit more, what did Sam say to you?
Sam is the polite paraphrasing version of it is that he'd prefer not to. Again, I had so many good, fun conversations with Sam. I really enjoyed talking to him. He's one of the brightest human beings I've ever met, and shockingly funny. And I just wish other people would have got the time to see that side of it.
John Gonzalez, great article today. Trust and the Process on The Ringer. You must read it right now if you haven't. John, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
All right, my man. See ya.